Hey everyone, finished watching the next VR Troopers episode. Uh, Dang, what was the name of that one? Mm, the Transmutant. Okay, so anyway, this one starts off with JB is preparing for an upcoming test at his college or wherever. Then Grimlord, meanwhile, has just received this new concoction, the Metamorphosis Pulse, from one of his scientists. It can be used to turn humans into mutants. So JB goes to the park to study. Jeb tags along for some reason. Sure, why not? Some soccer players nearby turn into Scugs and attack JB, because of course they do. Let's see. So he's pulled into the battle grid where he's zapped with a metamorphosis pulse. Professor Hart contacts the others about he's lost contact with JB, so they go to the park. They find him unconscious and covered with green glowing ooze. At the lab, they scan his body, and he appears to be okay, but his personality is really different. He's rude and aggressive with the others. He shoves them out of the way. He leaves, and he doesn't care about the test anymore, even though he was like all about it before. So then, Professor Hart warns the troopers that something about JB is changing. JB goes to the dojo and tells Tao that he's leaving. Tao is confused, but gives him some space. And that's never resolved either, so kind of a weird bit here. I kind of wonder, was there originally a resolution shot with Tao? Usually, when there's this kind of a plot where a character is under a spell or behaving weird, or there's an evil double or something, and they do something weird, the hero would have to like kind of clear things up with everybody who witnessed whatever was going on. But nope, we never get that here. Okay. So, also, whatever. Anyway, let's see. Ryan and Caitlin come to the dojo to try to talk to JB, and then they see him begin to mutate. He turns gray. He gets like kind of sort of scales. Then he gets like frizzy hair and big long ears, and then suddenly he's teleported away. And then, let's see. They they contact Professor Hart saying that JB's disappeared. Then Grimlord interrupts the transmission to tell them that JB is now one of his mutants. Then in virtual reality, we see Grimlord and the newly mutated JB. Grimlord tells JB that your name is now Transmutant, and so then he orders him to battle other mutants to display his skills, and then he plans to send him after Ryan. So the troopers are working with Professor Hart to come up with an antidote for JB. Then they detect him coming through the reality barrier with an army of monsters. So Ryan goes to save him, while Caitlin stays behind to work on the antidote with Professor Hart. Ryan, after a short battle with JB, manages to get him to remember who he was, and together they fight off all the other mutants. And let's see, they take him back to the lab where he's restored to total normal, and then he leaves to take his test. We don't know how the test turns out. It just ends there. Sure. Anyway, this is a decent episode. Clever use of the footage available. The stakes are sufficiently high. It's well paced. Oh, and technically, this is the first and I think only time that JB and Ryan are together in the Japanese footage. Technically. It's not him, like, transformed, but this is probably the closest we're going to get. Um, Let's see. One of the weird things in this, JB, when he's a mutant, he doesn't try to transform. Like, I kept. Like, and when I was watching this, I remembered seeing this episode before, and in my mind, I seem to remember that they did, like, an edit of JB, like, in his mutant form, transforming, and, like, the Spielbahn helmet would show up over his mutant head. But that never happened. I don't know where that thought came from. I guess it was just something in my mind. Anyway, they never even bring it up, like whether or not he can transform when he's mutated. I guess it's not really that important. It's just kind of a weird thing to notice. Percy's gone again, and the communicators are here, and I'm wondering, were these episodes shot really early before Percy came in, but then they decided that they wanted to have like an introduction for these communicator devices, so they rearranged the episodes? Because it's really weird. There seems to be a running thing with these episodes specifically. They have the communicators. Percy's not there. But these are kind of decent episodes when season one was kind of winding down and the episodes were getting kind of sloppy. this really feels like an earlier episode. So I'm wondering if that was the case. Also, I came across a weird thing. There's a VR Trooper comic book, and Percy's in it, but it doesn't look like Percy. It looks like that guy with the glasses that Caitlin crushed on way back in the episode Virtual V6, I think. So was that guy originally Percy? And that made me wonder, did they shoot some of the early episodes where they shot with that guy as Percy and then they cut him out because he's not Percy, but then they didn't have time to reshoot them with Aaron Pruner, the normal actor who plays Percy? I don't know. This episode is there's not a whole lot interesting to talk about with this episode. It's a lot more interesting to speculate about Percy in it. Which is kind of weird, considering Percy's not even in this episode. He's not relevant in the least. The newspaper place doesn't even show up at all either. The ending feels kind of rushed in this episode. There's never a scene with JB mutated at Professor Hart's lab. That's that's really weird, especially since they went to the trouble of creating makeup. Like when he's at the dojo, when he's beginning to mutate, they had like gray makeup. Then right before he's teleported, we see he has frizzy hair and long ears. That's all they needed. Like they could have taken him back to the lab, and we could have seen like him in that. And like Professor Hart explains that like we've started the detransitioning or demutating process, whatever. And so then he's turning back to normal slowly. And so we see him in that makeup, but we don't see him in any kind of makeup after that. So that's kind of weird. Also, kind of weird that they'd go to the trouble of putting him in this like heavy makeup early on and then never use it again. Like for a Saban show, I would have expected them to get their money's worth out of that makeup. Like shoot a scene in the dojo with him in the makeup, and then shoot a scene in the lab with him in that makeup. Excuse me. So yeah, kind of weird. They don't. Yeah, in the lab he just pops up and he's totally normal. So whatever. Yeah, it would have been neat to see him like going back through like the transformation stages in the American footage, but we don't get that. So that's about it for this one. There's not a whole lot to this episode. It's another pretty basic episode. It's a decent episode, but nothing really that interesting to talk about. I do like that it's one of those episodes where we kind of sort of have a good monster that's an ally to the troopers. I always like stories like that where it's someone not in like the main superhero team who joins the heroes against the bad guys, although this one kind of cheats it a little by having a character who is a character but not quite here. Whatever. I don't know what the Japanese story was in Metalder. What the green guy's story was if he was a friend of the main guy. Like I'm thinking that was probably the idea because he's reluctant to fight too much against him, and he accepts him pretty quickly when he joins him against the bad guys. Unless that footage is completely out of order and he's fighting with the guy at the beginning and then later turns on him. Possibly. I don't know for sure. So whatever. Anyway, okay episode. Not much to say, so that's it for this one. See ya.